Imagine pulling up to a restaurant, heart racing with that nervous excitement of meeting someone new. You fix your hair one last time in the rearview mirror, walk inside, and flash that hopeful smile. Hours later, your family gets the call that you're never coming home, and the only person who knows what happened is the stranger sitting across from you at the dinner table. But what the police eventually found, hidden in an ordinary suburban house, would turn this from a simple missing person case into a waking nightmare that a small community still can't stop talking about. This is the disturbing story of a first date that ended in a basement and the dark secret that was hiding just beneath the floorboards. It was a warm Friday evening in early autumn when 24-year-old Megan Coles decided to take a chance on love. She had been talking to a guy named Derek for about a week on a popular dating app. He seemed charming in his messages, funny in a dry sort of way, and most importantly, he didn't give off any of those immediate red flags that women are so often warned about. His photo showed a clean-cut man in his late 20s with a friendly smile, maybe a little quiet-looking, but definitely not threatening. Megan told her roommate that she had a good feeling about this one. She even joked that if she wasn't back by midnight, it meant the date was going really well. That throwaway line would later haunt everyone who heard it. She picked out a simple sundress, put on a little extra mascara, and drove off to meet Derek at a casual Italian place just outside of town. The restaurant staff later confirmed that the two of them were seated in a back corner booth around 7:30 that night. According to the server, everything seemed perfectly normal. They ordered pasta, shared a bottle of wine, and talked for nearly 2 hours. The server described Megan as bubbly and animated, often laughing at something Derek said. Derek was more reserved, but polite. He paid the bill in cash and even tipped well. Around 9:45, the couple got up to leave. Surveillance footage from the parking lot shows Megan and Derek standing by her car talking for a few more minutes. At one point, Megan leans in and gives him a hug. Then, the footage shows something that investigators would later obsess over frame by frame. Instead of getting into her own car, Megan turns and walks toward Derek's dark-colored sedan. She gets into the passenger seat without any visible hesitation. Derek walks around, gets behind the wheel, and they drive off together. That was the last time anyone ever saw Megan Coles alive in public. When Megan didn't return home that night, her roommate didn't panic right away. Remember, she had joked about not coming back until late. But by the following afternoon, with no text messages, no calls, and her location sharing suddenly turned off, that casual concern twisted into genuine fear. Megan was the type of person who always responded. She was glued to her phone like most people her age, and she never went more than a couple of hours without checking in with someone. By Saturday evening, her roommate filed a missing person report. The local police department initially treated it as a voluntary disappearance, suggesting that maybe she had just run off with a new boyfriend for a spontaneous weekend trip. But Megan's family pushed back hard. Her mother insisted that her daughter would never just vanish without telling anyone. She had a job interview on Monday morning, a job she was incredibly excited about. She wouldn't miss that. Something was wrong. Detectives quickly zeroed in on Derek Morrison, the man from the dating app. When they ran his name through the system, nothing major popped up at first. A couple of traffic tickets. He worked as a freelance IT consultant, which meant he spent most of his time at home and didn't have many coworkers to vouch for his character. On paper, he looked almost boring. But when detectives showed up at his front door to ask a few routine questions, the first thing they noticed was the smell. It was faint, but unmistakable, drifting from somewhere inside the house. The kind of chemical odor that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Derek stood in the doorway with a calm, almost blank expression. He told officers that Megan had come back to his place after dinner. They had a few drinks, and then she left in an Uber around midnight. He said he didn't know where she went after that. The story sounded rehearsed, like he had been practicing it in front of a mirror. But without any hard evidence, the officers couldn't push further. They left his doorstep that day, but they didn't leave the neighborhood. They started knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, and what they heard made their blood run cold. Several neighbors mentioned a strange sound coming from Derek's property in the early hours of Saturday morning. One elderly man who lived next door said he woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of what he thought was a woman screaming. It was short and sharp, and then it just stopped. He figured it was a cat or maybe someone's television turned up too loud. Another neighbor mentioned that Derek had been doing some kind of construction work in his basement for the past several weeks. He told people he was fixing a plumbing issue, but he never let anyone inside to take a look. He always kept his basement door locked, even when repairmen came over for other parts of the house. That detail was enough for detectives to secure a warrant. And on the third day after Megan's disappearance, they walked down those creaking wooden steps into Derek Morrison's basement. Nothing could have prepared them for what they found. At first glance, the basement looked like a normal, unfinished space. Concrete floors, exposed beams, a faint smell of dampness. But in the far corner, there was a freshly poured concrete patch. It looked out of place, the color slightly different from the rest of the floor. And next to it, a shovel caked in dried mud, a roll of plastic sheeting, and a pair of women's earrings that Megan's mother would later identify as the ones her daughter had been wearing on the night she disappeared. The realization hit the lead detective like a punch to the gut. They weren't standing in a basement. They were standing in a tomb. But what lay beneath that concrete patch would reveal a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. Because Derek Morrison wasn't just hiding one crime, and the walls of that basement had been keeping a secret for much longer than 3 days. Thank you for watching part 1 of this investigation. If you want to know what police uncovered beneath that concrete and the shocking history that followed Derek Morrison for years, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. Trust me, the story gets much darker from here. Let me know in the comments what you think really happened in that basement. I read every single one. The air in that basement was thick with the smell of damp concrete and something else, something metallic and rotten that no amount of bleach could ever truly hide. As the forensic team began the slow and careful process of breaking apart that freshly poured patch of floor, Derek Morrison sat upstairs in a police cruiser, his face completely blank, staring straight ahead through the windshield, like a man who wasn't really there anymore. He hadn't said a word since the earrings were discovered. The charming, quiet guy from the dating app had been replaced by an empty shell. It was as if the mask had physically slipped off his face the moment the basement door was opened. But the true horror wasn't just what was under the concrete. The true horror was the shoebox. While the forensic team worked on the floor, another investigator began searching a storage closet tucked away beneath the staircase. Behind stacks of old computer parts and paint cans, he found a simple cardboard shoebox, the kind you'd throw in the back of your closet and forget about. But this one was heavy, and it had been carefully taped shut. When the investigator cut through the tape and lifted the lid, his hand immediately flew to his mouth. Inside was a collection of women's driver's licenses, at least 7 of them, all showing young women with bright smiles and hopeful eyes. Some were from out of state, some were faded with age, and tucked right at the bottom, almost like a trophy, was Megan's license, still shiny and new. But that wasn't all. Beneath the licenses were photographs, Polaroids, taken inside that very basement. And in the background of each photo, you could see the walls before they were covered up, before the fresh paint, before the concrete patch. Some of the faces in those photographs matched the missing person flyers that had been circulating across 3 different states for years. Detectives immediately realized they weren't just solving one disappearance. They had accidentally stumbled upon something much, much bigger. Derek Morrison had been doing this for a long time, moving from town to town, state to state, working remote jobs that left no paper trail and building no real friendships. He would reinvent himself on every dating app, using slightly different names but always the same approach. The quiet, polite guy who seemed safe, the guy who tipped well and laughed at the right moments. He preyed on that exact feeling Megan had on her drive to the restaurant. The feeling of thinking, maybe this one is different. And he had been collecting souvenirs from every single victim, keeping them in that shoebox like some kind of twisted scrapbook of his crimes. Back in the basement, the concrete finally cracked open. And inside, wrapped in layers of heavy-duty plastic sheeting, were the remains of Megan Coles. The autopsy would later reveal that she had been strangled, most likely within an hour of arriving at his house. She never had a chance to fight back. The scream the neighbor heard around 2 in the morning was probably the moment she realized the door was locked from the outside. But as investigators dug deeper, both literally and figuratively, they uncovered something even more disturbing. Derek had built a small, soundproofed room in the corner of the basement years earlier, then covered the entrance with a heavy shelving unit. Inside that room, They found a mattress on the floor, restraints bolted to the wall, and a video camera set up on a tripod, still plugged in and ready to go. Megan hadn't been his first victim, and based on the setup, he had no intention of her being his last. The trial that followed was swift, but emotionally devastating. As the evidence piled up, prosecutors connected Derek to at least 5 other missing women across 4 states, dating back almost a decade. Women who had simply gone on a date and vanished. Women whose families had spent years staring at their phones, waiting for a call that never came. In court, Derek sat with that same blank expression, never showing an ounce of remorse, never explaining why he did it. When given the chance to speak, he simply said nothing. The silence in that courtroom was louder than any scream. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, but that did little to close the wound for the families left behind. And that leaves us with a question that lingers long after the headlines fade. How many more shoeboxes are out there, sitting in basements and storage closets, waiting to be found? How many more people walk past a murderer every single day, smiling at them in the grocery store, holding the door open at a coffee shop, swiping right on a dating app while sitting on the couch in their pajamas, never knowing what hides behind a friendly smile? Megan Coles was smart, loved, and careful. And still, one hug in a parking lot was all it took to seal her fate. The world can be a terrifying place, not because of monsters hiding in the shadows, but because sometimes the monsters sit across from you at dinner, pour you a glass of wine, and make you laugh. Thank you for sticking with me through this difficult story. If this case gripped you as much as it did me, please take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep bringing these important stories to light. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think there are more victims out there that were never found? Or was that shoebox the final piece of a decade-long puzzle? Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, stay safe, trust your instincts, and I'll see you in the next one.